1. This is a story about the most disturbing thing that ever happened to me while delivering pizzas in high school. There are a few others, but this one stands out above the rest. I was 16 years old and just got my license, so I needed a job to pay for a car. A few of my good friends were working at a local pizza place in town, close to my house, so I decided to apply and got the job, without having to interview because they were so short-staffed. They also hired me as a delivery driver, without ever checking to see if I had a driver's license or not. I did, but I always thought that was funny. About a month or two later, we were having a really busy night, and I was sent off to a delivery in a fairly nice part of town, the next city over. This was before GPS was common, and not very reliable, so we still used maps to locate houses. This particular house was in a new development, so it wasn't listed in any of our directories, but my boss thought he knew where it was and gave me directions. He was way off, so I had to call the house for directions, and this is where things got weird. The conversation on the phone was normal. I told the man I was near his house but needed directions because the ones I was given weren't accurate. He was very understanding and told me how to get there from the road I was on. A few minutes later, I pull into his driveway and instantly get a bad feeling. He was a man in his early 50s to 60s and was standing in the middle of his driveway with a creepy, satisfied smile on his face and wearing a maroon silk bathrobe. I got out of my car and gave him his 10-inch Hawaiian pizza, which cost $10.95 at the time. He gave me a $20 bill and told me to keep the change. Considering I was late on the delivery and had to call the customer for directions, I wasn't expecting anything for a tip, let alone almost $10. I drove away from the delivery thinking that something was off, but I got a great tip, so I was happy. I lit up a smoke and turned up my radio when I felt my phone vibrate. It was the number from the house I was just at. I got nervous, thinking it was going to be a complaint or something, because why else would someone call the delivery guy after he has delivered your food? My blood curdled at the words that came out of his mouth. "You want to come back over and get the knife?" he said. Or at least, that is what I heard. I said nothing and hung up the phone and drove back to work as fast as I could. I also called one of my friends who was working there at the time and told him what happened. On the 5-minute ride back to work, he called me at least 3 or 4 more times. For some reason, I actually answered one of the calls and he asked me if I wanted to come back after I get off work and spend the night. I was greeted at work by laughter from pretty much everyone working that night. Everyone thought I was either faking or overreacting. Then I got another call on my phone from the same guy. I showed my manager while the phone was ringing and let it go to voicemail. That's when he decided to call the restaurant. Once this happened, my manager realized this was probably a serious situation and answered the phone pretending to be me. He had a very short conversation with the guy, and at the end, told him he is not allowed to do business with us anymore, and we are blocking his number. When my boss hung up the phone, his face was pure white and looked like he could barely comprehend what had just happened. I asked what the guy said, but my boss would not repeat the words that came out of his mouth. I was so paranoid that I had to stay with a friend that night instead of going home. Guess who called me a couple hours later? Yes, he called. At least 10 times. For at least a week or two, I was living in fear of being kidnapped. I was always looking at the people or cars that were around me, being paranoid that I was being watched or followed. It's possible that I was right because I started getting phone calls again. This is when I decided it was time to call the cops and put an end to this. I explained everything to the officer, and he assured me that he would take care of the situation. Turns out the cop did nothing. I live in a low-crime town of less than 20,000 people. This guy didn't have anything else to do that day except write some speeding tickets during the afternoon, then some DWIs in the evening. The calls kept coming, and my paranoia grew. This needed to stop, so I told my boss that things hadn't improved, and he called the cops himself. An officer came down to the restaurant and took down our statements. Unlike the other officer, this man seemed visibly shaken and angered by the events that had happened. He promised me that he would personally handle the situation, and I didn't have to worry anymore. This police officer followed up on what he said, and I never heard from that creep again. I kept that same job for about 3 years, and had nothing but great times there. However, creepy silk bathrobe fuckface, go fuck yourself and let's not meet, alright? 2. I have to say, even after a year has passed, I feel almost guilty that this happened. I'm sorry to turn this into a weird personal thing, but I need to write it all out, even this weird prologue. So like I said, I feel guilty. I used to read the stories on this subreddit and wonder what it was like to have someone obsessed with you. As a girl who never had anyone pay much attention to her, in a weird and really fucked up way, I wanted something like this to happen to me. And I'm so sorry to anyone who has ever been harassed or stalked because I was so wrong. And I'm sorry if this comes across as fake. I have no idea how to prove it. All I can do is tell you what happened. I live in a small town. There's not much to do. One of the things that attracts lots of kids, red flag already, right, is the pool. The pool building has lots of stuff, like a concert venue, a skating rink, etc. That's where a young girl was first approached by a man. He said a few things, not a big deal. Then when the same girl was leaving the pool, the man attempted to get her in his truck. The girl's sister came out of the building at the perfect time and got her out of that situation. I don't know a lot of specifics because that girl wasn't me. She was my next-door neighbor. So I noticed when the drive-by started. We live on a dead-end street, so if someone drives down our street, they have to drive around the little circle at the end and go back. I'm up late often, and I noticed a red truck always driving by, pausing in front of that same girl's house, and then continuing on. This was always sometime past midnight. During a football game when all the neighbors were gathered at the same house, I brought it up. The mother of the girl instantly went pale and asked for more information. I eventually had to talk to a police officer, but didn't have much to tell him. I didn't know enough about vehicles to recognize make, but I described it to the best of my ability. Sadly, this didn't lead to anything, except for an angry Facebook post from the mother's friend. The truck visit slowed after that, until midsummer. It was the middle of the day when the red truck stopped at the end of our street. A man got out and walked towards the girl's house. Her mom and her sister were gone for an appointment, and the girl was playing on the front lawn with a few of the other neighborhood kids. The man had his phone out and aimed at the kids. This is probably the stupidest decision I've ever made, but I love those kids. And I'm sorry that this sounds like I'm hyping myself up, but this is the truth. I've known them since they were babies. They play in our backyard. I've babysat them all. So I went outside. I asked the guy what he was doing. He was visibly put off. and quickly said he needed directions to the center of town. I pointed him in the right direction, which is the direction he'd been coming from in the first place, and he left. I called the police after that, and I thought that'd be the end. I was wrong. The girl was left alone, but my hell had just begun. The red truck would be waiting outside of my high school almost every day, at the edge of the lot where the school's cameras didn't reach. I parked in the upper lot, far away from him, so I was never really in danger, but it was still unnerving. A series of fake accounts tried to follow my Instagram, add me on Facebook, and follow me on Twitter. The bio lines at first were blank, but after I'd blocked them all, they began to get sinister. They were never threats. Instead, they were filled with personal details, my birthday, my phone number, my address, etc. I told my parents immediately, and took screenshots of all the accounts, and went to the police, who took all the information, but said that until a serious threat or something like that emerged, they couldn't do anything. I feel no resentment towards the police, as I think their hands really were tied. In response, I took down all my accounts and changed my number. By now it was late fall, early winter. My car got keyed in my own driveway. Her front door would randomly be banged on in the middle of the night. A co-worker at the store where I worked told me a scruffy guy had come into our store, which was a knockoff Claire's type thing, so it was a little strange, and just wandered around. Eventually, he asked when my next shift was. My co-worker wouldn't tell him. He left without fuss. My school got a call that I had lice. I was called out of class, and the rumor spread. Bizarre, but humiliating all the same. When I had to get the mail from the box at the end of the street, a car, not the red truck, would drive slowly behind me, and then drive away at a tire-squealing pace when I turned around to see who it was. Eventually, after about a 3-month period of the events dwindling, they stopped altogether. I still have no idea why. I guess this has stuck with me so long because it kept changing. He never stuck to the same tactic long, kept changing it, like he was Googling creepy things to do to your stalking victim. And there was no real ending. And I am aware that these were all tiny things, but they added up. About a year of my life was spent in constant suspense, and now I still always look over my shoulder. I won't go out alone after dark. I keep the shades in our living room closed after 7 p.m. Maybe the scariest thing was that I felt like I was doing everything right. I told my parents. I got proof. And I was still powerless. I'm just glad it's over. Three. I'm a 25-year-old guy. This happened 4 years ago. It is still unresolved, if you would like to call it that. This was a Friday night, and I had gotten off of work around 5:30 p.m. and was ready to make plans for the night. I was recently single, and with asking readers not to judge, I had made up for lost time. I had met a few new girls, but most other single girls I knew didn't think my breakup was for real because my girlfriend and I had been together for such a long time. As the type to stay away from clubs, I began to explore online dating. While at home, I started looking at girls near me on Plenty of Fish. For some reason, that night I really wanted to be in the company of a woman, and the hour I had spent with no suitable response began to wear my patience down. I eventually looked at Craigslist and posted a personals ad. Now, I know Craigslist is not the best place to meet people, but at this point I was thinking with my other head, if you know what I mean. I went out for an hour or two, and when I returned I noticed I had some responses to my ad, mostly spam, obvious escorts, and catfish. I may have been desperate, but I wanted someone I felt comfortable with on a friend and personal level. After weeding out, I saw one response that looked legit. I could tell she had read the ad, as it was an actual written response. She even included a few pics, all of which looked normal. She was cute, but didn't look like a model or from a magazine or anything like that. They just looked like selfies she took of herself. In hindsight, there was something about this that I didn't catch at first, which is important to the rest of the story. I use a dummy email for Craigslist, and I have it set up that pictures do not download automatically. I learned my lesson after posting an ad for a table and getting a dick pic. However, these pics showed up right away as soon as I opened the email. This will tie in later. After some back and forth, I decide I'll come over. She gives me the address and I see that it is an apartment building. Even better, as I'm always thinking of safety. I didn't want to go inside an actual home. I get there and email her that I'm outside. Just give me the exact building and apartment number. She tells me, get out and walk to the courtyard so I can make sure I am who I say I am. Understandable. I said I was 5'11". It would be scary on her end if someone 6'5" was out there. After seeing that it was truly me, she says she has to tell me something. I'm thinking the worst, and start to think of what it could be. She then tells me I'm really a man, I'm sorry. No, I'm pissed. But that washes over immediately and I just feel played. I'm prepared to just take my loss and quickly head back to my car when I get more emails. He tells me to come in, and that he can give me money or cook or have drinks or whatever. He sounds like he really just wants the company. But I am sorry, I am not just chilling with some guy. He then sends the last email that simply says, $200, 2 hours, no touching, no sex. It catches my eyes, and I walk up to his door. Stupid, I know. But at this point I'm thinking, I'll just take his $200, maybe knock over some of his things for tricking me, and just leave. My better judgment gets the best of me, thankfully. And about 5 feet from the door, I turn around and leave. I decide that this was a sign, and I just need to stay home for the night. I stopped at 7-Eleven to grab a beer. I get back in my car and start reading through Facebook. All of a sudden, I get a Facebook message from someone I don't know, who I can tell is a fake profile, saying, "I'm sorry, can you please come back?" I get upset of the nerve of this guy, and then the air escapes from my throat. How did he get my personal Facebook? I used a fake email that has no ties whatsoever to my real name. I message him back. "Leave me alone. I apologize. I am not interested." The man then threatened me by saying something along the lines of, "You should listen, my name, of my job." It was listed on my Facebook, but it was my first ever camp job before college, so it didn't really mean much. I told the man, either stop or I am coming back with some help to make you stop. I didn't get any more messages after that. I deleted the Facebook messages, deleted my email account, and went home. 2 days later, I am on my computer when again I get a Facebook message from the guy that says, "Black shirt." I didn't even begin to give the time of day to decipher that, and delete the message. I block the man. 10 seconds later, I come to the realization that I am wearing a black v-neck. I look at the window as if I'm suspecting someone to be peering inside, when I remember I am on the 11th floor of a high-rise building. There's only one way in, and the door has a strong deadbolt lock. Whenever I come in, I quickly close and lock the door, due to my pets, so I knew there was no one physically in my place with me. I'm startled, but I brush it off as a scare tactic. I bet like 6 in 10 guys right now are wearing a black shirt. The man just seemed like a lonely troll, and I'm sure he was doing this to everyone who fell trapped to his Craigslist scheme. I closed my computer and went on with my day. 2 days later, I am sitting back at my computer, per usual, when once again the guy messages me. I already know it's going to be nonsense, so I am going to do a mark as read delete so he cannot see that I read it. I see the partial message that says, black and red globe. I literally scoot my chair back and stare at my computer. Right behind me, I'm sure, reflecting in my screen, if the light would have hit it correctly, sat a globe with black water and red land. A friend got it for me because it was different. I understood right away this man could access my webcam. I then thought back to my original email. He penetrated my picture firewall, and he somehow tied my fake email to my real name. I am pretty good with computers, but I am the first to take note when I am dealing with someone who is a genius with computers. This man gave off every vibe that he knew what he was doing in the computing world, and maybe even the hacking world. I slam it shut and pace around the room, mumbling to myself that I had been so careless to get in a position like this. I run to a drawer and scramble for the black electrical tape. I find some and place it over the cam. I am officially freaked out at this point. I am not a tough guy by any means, and I hold my own in most situations, but I felt out of control. I delete my Facebook account and every other social media account as well. I spend the next 10 minutes privatizing my online presence and cleaning out my computer. I keep the tape on and try to get on with my week. 2 days later, I come home from work around 6 p.m. I come in and close the door and greet my pets. I see a white piece of paper that was slid under my door. This usually meant maintenance at a project going on. We were late on rent, or the elevators were broken. We got a lot of those elevator letters. I pick it up and place it on the table as I get my dog to stop jumping on me and put my bag down. I pick up the note and it says blue doormat. To give you some background, during a drunken escapade, my ex and I bought a bright blue doormat that we were both 100% certain was green and would match the green carpet outside our door. When we both sobered up the next morning, we realized how off we were and decided to keep it as a joke. This man had been inside my building and at my door. The thing is, it was a big building. You would need to know the building number, address, floor number, and apartment number. My dog was going crazy. But I ran into the kitchen and grabbed a knife. I swung the main closet doors open. Nothing. I run to the bedroom and swing those closet doors open. Once again, nothing. I race in the bathroom and open the shower curtain. Nothing. The man had not been inside, but he had been close enough. I am not the type to call the police, but I felt like I didn't know what to do. After sleeping on it, I call 911 the next day and ask for non-emergency. After a hold, I am connected to a lady and tell her what's going on. She says she can't do anything, but gives me the number to the police of the city where the man lived. I call and speak to an officer and basically tell him I'm not trying to press charges or anything, but can someone please go over there and scare him or something. I could tell the cop wanted nothing to do with me, but I kept his ear, probably because he could hear a rational young man basically pleading with him to help him. He said he would send someone out there. I get a call a few hours later from the station. The cop I spoke to before says that there was no answer at the door. He told me he went to speak to the leasing office, and the sales manager said that the only person who lived there was an older lady who had been there forever. I froze for a moment. The guy wasn't even at that apartment when I came there. I started to think. Was he in a different apartment? Was he waiting in a car behind a tree somewhere in the courtyard? I personally think he was somewhere inside a neighboring apartment just watching. However, I had never felt so careless. The cop told me to reactivate my account and wait for another message. I did that for a month or so before shutting it down for good, before making another one. I just felt more comfortable that way. I've never had another encounter, and have since moved and gotten a new computer. I got the courage to go up to that apartment twice. The first time I didn't get a response when I knocked. The second time I was greeted by an older lady, similar to what the cop told me. I told her what happened, and she assured me she had no sons or nephews or anything. She left me with a lecture telling me to be safe. That was 4 years ago. I'm 25 now, and look back at my 21-year-old self. I would never even consider meeting someone online like that now. Please, if it seems sketchy, it is sketchy. So guy using a young lady's picture to lure young men to his apartment. Let's not meet again. Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 141. Now, I've never actually used Craigslist, and the more and more I read of these stories, I'm very glad I've never felt the urge to use it for anything, actually, because it seems whether or not you're using the personals ads, or if you're just looking to buy a table or a stuffed badger or whatever, it's just not worth the risk. Stick to eBay, much better. You don't really have to meet people then. You will still encounter some very creepy people, but unless they're packaging themselves up and mailing themselves to you, it's much safer all round. Okay, and with that lesson, I'm going to head off for now, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.